queers and allies. Welcome to our new podcast, Queerious Queers. I am your host, Munia, and I'm joined today by Maeve. We are both members of QYAC, the Queer Youth Action Committee, composed of several queer youth between the ages of 14 and 25. QYAC aims to empower youth from the 2S LGBTQ community through developing and delivering resources, events, and social media outreach that educate on queer issues and that provide safer spaces for queer youth in Ottawa to connect with their community and celebrate their identities. QYAC is also part of the Youth Services Bureau of Ottawa, or YSB, which is a nonprofit organization that provides access to employment, health, housing, mental health, youth engagement, and youth justice. The goal of this podcast is to give us the space to have some positive dialogue about our experiences as queer people, since we feel that a lot of media coverage heavily focuses on very painful issues. While it's important to discuss the discrimination that is faced by the community, we also want to create this space to celebrate queerness and some of our most positive experiences. Lastly, we want to thank our supporter, Youth Action Now, for funding this initiative. Today, we'll be discussing queerness and race. So I'll get us started by asking you, Maeve, how do you identify racially and as a member of the 2S LGBTQ community?
So I'm Persian. I'm from Iran, which means I'm from the Middle East. I am very much queer, and the label that fits me best is pansexual and also non-binary. How about you?
So my parents were born in Bangladesh, but I was born here on Turtle Island, and I identify as queer and non-binary. So that's a bit about me.
Was great hearing from you. Our next question is to tell us a bit about your culture and how it views queerness. Also, are there any ways that it celebrates queer identities?
It can be a bit difficult to know everything because I feel that because of like the history of South Asia with colonialism, there's a lot of stuff that was taken away from them because they went through so much trauma, and even generationally they're still dealing with that through 200 years of a lot of like violence and pain. I do know that in Bangladesh, like there's officially like three genders, which is really interesting because a lot of people view that country as like very like homophobic and transphobic. And there is like a lot of hate crimes that it's not legal. But there's a lot of people who identify as third gender who are like in politics. They have like a large presence within the community as well. Like they get invited for spiritual ceremonies and weddings. So it's interesting because they have like certain things that uh, are seen as more not exactly accepted but are more visual. There's representation,
Mhm.
even though there's still like a lot of violence and difficulties as well. What about you?
Right, yeah, that was very interesting, and I can definitely relate to some of the things you just said. So, our culture used to be entirely different before the revolution that happened in 1979 in Iran. The government then changed and it started changing our whole culture, and it kind of brought it down with itself. So, we had a very progressive culture before the revolution, and our Shah, which translates into king, not only care about women's rights, but also was about to make same-sex marriage legal, which was absolutely amazing. Things are not looking very good for queer people in Iran right now. The government has very strict laws and penalties for homosexuality and believes homosexuality is haram from a religious point of view, since our whole law has been based on Islam. It's different for trans people though. Transition in our country is completely legal. The process might not be as smooth, but as far as I know, trans people all around the world go through a lot of challenges just to be able to start the process after transition.
Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know a lot of that stuff, and it was really interesting to learn about. I was wondering if I can ask you, does your queerness change the way you experience your culture? And does it allow you to experience your culture in multiple ways, perhaps?
Honestly, I feel very conflicted all the time. As a queer person who was figuring their identity out when I was a teenager, I experienced homophobia in like a lot more ways than I had the capacity for. And that made me despise my people and my culture for a very long time. However, I am now trying to be in peace with everything that's happened to me and try to understand why people behaved the way they did. Being queer has made my country feel less like home, but has also given me the best chosen family who come from the same culture and had to immigrate to other countries for obvious reasons. They make me feel at home no matter where I am, so I guess that's kind of heartwarming to feel a part of a community of people with whom you share the same sort of trauma and who understand what you go through and can help you get through hard times.
Yeah, I definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying. I feel like my identity at times has made me resentful towards my culture and have some internalized racism that I'm still working on unlearning. Because even though like I grew up here, and a lot of people I find who grew up here often don't have access to their culture, or they're like the only ones here. I do have a lot of family in Ottawa, and I was exposed to a lot of things, like a lot of family gatherings. I was brought to a lot of cultural events, and I struggled to feel like I fit in. Um, but like you said, I think meeting other people who are also like queer and trans who are also from a similar culture as me, and knowing that they exist has helped me a lot and allowed me to experience like multiple sides, and allowed me to like have this sort of healing experience with those people, to realize that it is like normal and it's okay and I'm not alone. And I think all that has just helped me develop a much healthier relationship with my culture right now.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So, as a follow-up to that, what is intersectionality and how do you think this intersectionality affects your identity?
So, Kimberly Crenshaw, a Black law professor and a social theorist, first coined the term intersectionality. It's a framework for conceptualizing a person, group of people, or social problem as affected by a number of discriminations. It takes into account people's overlapping identities and experiences in order to understand the complexities of their identities and the prejudices they may face. So for me, it would be my queerness, my sexual orientation, my gender identity, uh, and also my race, which affects like my experiences, my access to resources, the spaces I feel safer in. So it really allows me to see multiple facets of who I am and how I feel in different environments based on those facets of me. What about you?
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing. It was very nice to know about all that. For me, this intersectionality has made me be kind of more proud of my identity, maybe in some ways. Being queer in a place like Iran is not easy, so it makes me feel very brave to have gotten through that. Also, coming out is very important, like is a very important part of each queer person's life. And many queer people that come from the same background as me have had to go through a lot of challenges, such as being disowned by their families for cultural and religious reasons, and risking that kind of just to be able to their true selves has made them so much more fearless in life.
It is really great to hear your perspective and your bravery. Is there any interesting queer history within your culture that you would like to share?
Actually, we do have a lot of queer history in our culture. So the most famous ones are Shams and Maulana, who everyone knows by Rumi. There are people who believe their relationship was very professional or rather spiritual, and that they wrote poems in praise of God, but there's also a lot of evidence that they were actually lovers and that they were the subject for each other's literary works and poems. Also, not only there were queer people among our poets and artists, but also they existed among the people who ruled our country at times. Apparently, Abbas the Great, or Shah Abbas, which translates into King Abbas, had some experiences with homosexuality when he was our king in late 16th, early 17th century, maybe, during Safaviya period. And also, um, Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi was openly in a relationship with one of his military servants, and there are a lot of letters and paintings of them, and their letters to each other are left. And there are also a lot of poems by our famous poets that describe them as lovers.
Yeah, that was really interesting to learn about. It it's really nice to hear how much you know about it because I feel like I don't have all the details from my experiences, especially historically in my culture. And I feel like I wasn't exposed to a lot of things. Like I can't really read in Bengali. I was only taught to kind of mostly speak it. So I feel like I have a lot less access to like literature and different things that I'd like to maybe learn about one day. Especially with growing up outside of Bangladesh, I think a lot of people who experience that have certain lack of access to certain things. I
Mm-hmm.
do know that Bangladesh used to be part of like India before colonization, and it was very Hindu influenced. And so in Hinduism, there's a lot of themes of queer and trans identities, like a lot of deities that switch genders, that have like homoerotic encounters. There's even like the Kama Sutra that depicts like images of people of all genders, like exploring their sexuality. And my family is also Muslim, and I've heard historically of a lot of Muslim queer art that's still being explored, and I'd love to learn more about that. There's a lot of like interesting images that I've seen like online and stuff of old Muslim queer art that depicts like people of the same gender, like being romantic, being like sending letters to each other and stuff like that. So I think it would be really interesting to learn more about that stuff for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I also come from a Muslim family, so I know exactly what you're talking about. On that note, I wanted to ask you if there were any queer role models in your community growing up, and if not, who is your favorite QT BIPOC celebrity, and why are they your favorite?
So just as a note for listeners, QT BIPOC stands for Queer, Trans, Black, Indigenous Person of Color. And as growing up, I don't think I had any role models. Like I lived in a part of town that wasn't I didn't see a lot of queer people growing up, and in my family either, because they're not like there yet. It's not really, I didn't really have any older family members or anybody that was out as far as I knew anyway. But I did relate, especially now, to a lot of celebrities like Little Nas X, Janelle Monáe, Laverne Cox. I think I see a lot more representation in the media now than I did when I was growing up. And I just feel like they're so like outspoken and real with who they are that it really makes me feel like more seen, and I really like the way they talk about themselves. They have a lot of like confidence, and I don't know, it just inspires me, and I feel very like connected to those kind of like celebrities. And yeah, it'd be interesting to hearing about your perspective on this question as well.
So like I didn't have any role models growing up, same as you, because like not many people were out for obvious reasons in our culture. But we had this one avant-garde painter and sculptor called Bahman Mohasses, who was obviously in a very glass closet. Our country rarely discusses or acknowledges Bahman Mohasses' sexuality. His work has been destroyed by the authorities a lot while he lived and was an active artist. I remember finding out about him being gay while I was in high school, and it gave me such hope knowing that he could still become such a famous artist and very successful under this much pressure and the many restrictions and discriminations that were there.
That was really profound to listen to. I wanted to ask, how has the intersectionality of your identity shaped the way you view the world?
As a person with intersectional identity, it is very important for me to become a representation for other people with similar identities and help them be heard and seen. And that's why being on the Queer Action Youth Committee and being a part of this project is very important to me. I would have to say I didn't used to have this strong sense of empathy before I started learning about my intersectionality and queer rights and how it affects many aspects of our lives. How about you? How does it shape your view of the world?
Yeah, it makes me view the world, I think, very differently from before, like when it wasn't super in tune with my identity, and to see other people for more than just one thing, when and where they are coming from and the experiences they have that I may share as well. I do really like what you had to say about being part of QYAC. I do find that like I joined like queer activism like when I was like, even though I grew up here, I definitely joined it when I was older, like probably in my 20s. Because even in my high school we didn't have like any like GSAs or things like that. And it's certainly a different experience, but I do feel like being part of like something that there's also other queer people there who also like are interested in the same things as you. It does feel very like encouraging and inspiring to be surrounded by those kind of people.
Yeah, definitely. That was really interesting. So do you think your culture needs to be more progressive in how it views the towards LGBTQ community? And if so, how are they currently adapting?
I think it's hard to say because there's a lot of corruption in Bangladesh and a lot of poverty. So I think it's hard for them to move forward sometimes when there's so many like forces against them. Um, I think if they hadn't been affected by certain things, maybe even outside of their control, they would be a lot further along. But they also have like a lot of things that like a lot of countries don't have. And I think it's important to kind of see that, even though I think like it definitely could be more accepting of queer and trans people, even within people of my culture who live outside of Bangladesh. Like I hear, with my experiences and from other queer people I know within the culture, it's still really hard for them to like to come out to their families or to have like relationships. So there's definitely a lot of work to do. I just don't really like the comparison of it to like Western cultures, because I find that every culture has like difficulties, and I don't like comparing it to make it seem like it's lesser than. It's just
Mhm.
different, and that's how I see it. And what about you? What's your perspective?
So our culture definitely needs to be more progressive, and I think it has the potential to become more progressive because young individuals now have more access to resources and can educate themselves these days. Also, it's becoming less of a taboo in certain communities. As there are more teachers talking about queerness at schools and universities, and the ones that are accepting sometimes try to reach out to the queer and trans kids and let them know that they are safe in the environment and that they have someone to talk about certain difficulties in their lives if they need to. So I think that's very nice of them.
On a similar note, our following question is about what are the misconceptions of your culture in relation to the 2S LGBTQ plus community? Are some places a lot more progressive than we may think?
That's a very interesting question, and I do not have like the perfect answer for it. I just know that like some of the misconceptions are that um, like some people who grow up in very religious countries, they cannot be religious if they are queer. I am not a religious person, but I know many people who have a very good relationship with their religion and like the God that they praise, and they're queer and they embrace that queerness. So that's something that I know about, and I have like been in contact with people who live like that and have religious values and are proudly out.
Yeah, I think do relate to a lot of what you're saying. I don't have like a religious connection personally either, but I do know a lot of people who are also like very religious and very queer, and they find like a lot of like connection with their spirituality. One of the misconceptions that I think a lot of people make is that, especially with South Asia, that they think everything is homophobic and transphobic and that there's like no queer or trans people there. But really, there's people suffering all over the world. And um, I'm really grateful for my opportunities here and that I grew up here, but I don't think it's right to look down on other people, especially when there's so little understanding. Like I've often been told things like, oh, maybe you should go back there and help the queer and trans people there. And I feel like it's a really weird thing to say to me because I didn't grow up there. I don't have a like I'm not aware of I have some awareness, but I don't have a personal awareness of the issues that the people there may face. So even though it's great to help out and want to do things for your community, I think you need to take the voices of the people there into account because there are many queer and trans peoples in those countries who are very present and they have a voice. And I think that's important to recognize.
Thank you very much for sharing that personal story. It means a lot. So our last question for today is, what are you most proud of in relations to your intersectional identity? Or do you have any funny stories about being a cutie BIPOC person?
I love meeting other people who are like cutie BIPOC. It makes me part of being part of that community and to see all the amazing things, movements, and activism that it's produced. Like that community started everything. They started pride, protest, social activism. And I feel like we're such pioneers and trailblazers. And I'm really proud of being part of a group like that. I think it's really made me feel really inspired rather than even though sometimes I feel a little bit down, it's really nice to see how much strength and resistance there is within the community. And that makes me feel very encouraged.
Yes, absolutely. That was um, the perfect answer, honestly. I really relate to that. I have one funny story. I'm not really a fan of TikTok, but some of the trends on TikTok are about like QT BIPOC people. And one of them is how people make videos and they say that like, so I'm illegal in, I don't know, one of the 13 countries in the world that like homosexuality is illegal in them. And I find, so I'm a fan of dark comedy, and I find that part of the genre of dark comedy because it talks about a very heavy subject, but being able to like see people all over the world like kind of relating to the same thing and sharing the same trauma and making videos and connecting to each other, it's kind of nice to like kind of lighten the mood. And yeah, I think it's just funny how people talk about it.
Yeah, I've seen that trend too, and it's great to hear that you find it relatable.
Yeah, so I just want to say that I don't think there are really perfect answers to any of these questions, and that our knowledge, I think I speak for both of us when I say our knowledge is mostly based on our lived experience. So, to our audience, please reach out to us if you have any interesting facts, any suggestions, or corrections. We would absolutely love to hear your feedbacks. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Queerious Queers. If you like today's topic and want to learn more about race and queerness, we have included resources in the description. You can catch us on social media to see the type of educational content we create and the events that we host. You can go to our page on Instagram or Facebook. Our username is QYAC.YSB. Check the link in our description and our bio for our email as well. We are also holding a very exciting giveaway. To enter, please see our corresponding Instagram post, and we will be contacting you through our social media for more information. One final shout out is to Youth Action Now for supporting us in this endeavor and amplifying our voices. See you next time on Queerious Queers.